why my future wife is from another country. I often wonder why destiny decided that my future wife would not be from my own kingdom, my own soil, my own traditions, but from a land far away where the air carries a different scent, where the stars have their own rhythm, and where even silence speaks another language. Perhaps fate wanted to teach me that love is not bound by borders or bloodlines. Perhaps it wished to humble a prince who once believed that everything he desired could be found within the golden walls of his own palace. From my earliest days, I was raised to think that loyalty lies only within our own realm, that the pride of a prince is to marry within his kingdom, to strengthen alliances and carry forward the legacy of his ancestors. I followed every lesson, every royal command, until I met her. She wasn't like anyone I had ever seen. Her eyes carried the calm of distant oceans. Her words flowed with honesty untainted by politics, and her laughter, it felt like music from another universe. She didn't bow when I entered. She looked at me like I was a man, not a prince. And for the first time I felt seen. At first, I tried to resist. How could a prince of this land fall for a woman from another world? Our customs were different. Our gods bore different names, and our languages danced on opposite tongues. Yet, no matter how hard I tried to keep my heart still, it kept whispering her name in the silence of the night. I began to realize that the heart doesn't care for borders or languages or crowns. It only knows where it belongs. Now, when I look at the horizon, the line where my kingdom ends and hers begins, I don't see a boundary. I see a bridge, a promise, a destiny written in two languages, sung in two souls. Perhaps that's why my future wife is from another country, because my story was never meant to be confined within one. It was during a diplomatic journey that I first saw her in a courtyard filled with the fragrance of foreign flowers and the soft murmur of a language I barely understood. I remember stepping down from my horse, the weight of my crown pressing against my temples, and then catching a glimpse of her among the crowd. She wasn't dressed in jewels or gold. She wore simplicity like it was her armor, grace like it was her birthright. Her eyes met mine for only a moment, but that moment burned into eternity. I had attended countless ceremonies, greeted hundreds of noble women, but never had my breath faltered the way it did then. That day, I returned to my chambers with her face engraved in my thoughts, wondering how someone I barely knew could shake the walls of everything I believed in. As the days unfolded, duty became the veil I hid behind, yet curiosity betrayed me. I found reasons to walk through her gardens, excuses to speak with her father, and opportunities to hear her voice again. She spoke softly, yet her words carried strength. When she talked about her homeland, her people, and her dreams, I realized how small my own world had been. In her simplicity, there was freedom. In her foreignness, there was truth. The more I listened, the more I saw the chains of my upbringing, the expectations that told me what to love, whom to serve, and how to feel. She made me question not only the world but myself. Nights grew longer after that. I would stand by my window, watching the moon drift over the foreign city, imagining that somewhere beneath the same silver light, she too was awake, lost in thoughts that mirrored mine. I could no longer sleep peacefully within the silk and marble of my royal quarters. My heart had escaped through the open balcony, chasing her laughter across the distance. Every letter she sent was a treasure I guarded like a relic. Every word a spark that lit the dark corridors of my loneliness. I began to write poetry again, something I hadn't done since my childhood. For she had reminded me that even princes are allowed to feel deeply. But love in a palace is not always a blessing. Whispers began to travel faster than the wind. Advisors frowned. My father's silence grew heavier, and the court began to weigh the worth of a foreign heart. They spoke of alliances, of political consequences, of the risk of losing the loyalty of our people. They did not understand that I wasn't trying to weaken our kingdom. I was trying to make it stronger through truth. What is a nation built on, if not the courage to embrace what is beyond itself? Yet their words pierced me like blades, forcing me to choose between the throne and the woman who had taught me what it truly meant to be alive. She, too, was torn between her duty and her love. She would tell me that a queen must think of her people before her own happiness, that her loyalty was to her land, and still her eyes betrayed her. They trembled when I spoke of leaving, glistened when I swore that I would return. We were bound by something stronger than titles, stronger than fear. Our love was the quiet rebellion of two souls who refused to bow before the cruelty of tradition. Even if the world disapproved, even if our crowns were taken away, I knew I would rather live one day with her than a lifetime within the cold walls of obedience. Time tested us, seasons changed and distance grew. Letters became fewer, battles louder, and yet the fire never dimmed. I began to see her in everything, in the music of the palace minstrels, in the scent of rain after long droughts, in the reflection of dawn over the lake. My people saw a prince who had matured, who led with compassion rather than command. They did not know that it was her love that had softened the iron of my heart into gold. Even when she was far away, she was my compass, my conscience, my silent strength. Now, years later, when I think of her, I realize that fate had written our story not for pleasure, but for purpose. She taught me that love does not always demand possession. Sometimes it demands transformation. I became a better ruler, a humbler man, and a freer soul because of her. The distance between our countries remains, but the distance between our hearts has vanished. I have learned that borders are illusions drawn by men who fear connection. She may live beyond my kingdom's horizon, but she reigns within me, the queen of a realm that no map can ever show. The day of our reunion came like a whisper carried by the wind. After years of silence and political storms, I was sent once again to her country, this time not as a young prince in love, but as a man weathered by time and responsibility. The journey felt endless. Each mile carried memories I had buried under the weight of duty. When I arrived, I stood before the same palace where I had first seen her, the same marble steps that once echoed with laughter. Yet, everything had changed. The walls seemed quieter, the colors faded, as if the place itself had aged with me. And when she finally appeared, her beauty was no longer that of a dream. It was real, mature, touched by life's seasons, and somehow even more divine. We did not speak at first. Words would have been too small to carry the years that had passed between us. Her eyes told me stories I had missed, of the nights she stayed awake under the same moon, of the letters she never sent, of the tears she hid behind the queen's smile. When I finally stepped closer, I realized that though time had drawn lines on our faces, it had also erased every distance between our souls. I wanted to say her name, but it caught in my throat, trembling with 1,000 unsaid emotions. And then she smiled, that same smile that had once melted the arrogance of a prince and turned him into a man capable of love. We walked together through the gardens where it had all begun. The flowers had changed, but their fragrance carried the same sweetness. She told me how her kingdom had endured wars and droughts, how she had led her people with courage she once believed she didn't possess. I listened with quiet admiration, realizing that the woman before me had become the kind of ruler I always aspired to be. There was no envy, only pride, the pure kind that comes from seeing the one you love become everything the world once doubted. It was then that I understood that love doesn't just unite hearts, it creates empires built on strength, patience, and faith. When the evening came, we stood by the lake where the moonlight shimmered on the water's surface like scattered diamonds. I confess that I had thought of her every day, that her absence had been my greatest teacher. I told her how her memory had shaped my rule, how every decision I made carried her influence. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of understanding. She said that she too had lived every day guided by the thought of me, that even when surrounded by her court, she felt a part of her heart living in another land, another soul. In that quiet moment, words became vows, again unspoken but eternal. We knew that we could not undo the years that had passed, nor the choices that kept us apart. But there was peace in knowing that love had not been wasted, that it had grown with us rather than faded. We sat under the stars and I told her that perhaps this was the kind of love meant for us. Not one of possession, but of presence, a love that could cross kingdoms without ever needing to conquer them. She rested her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in years I felt whole again. No crown, no throne, no title, just a man and a woman who had defied time. When I left her kingdom once more, it did not feel like a farewell. The sea between our lands no longer felt like separation, but connection. I carried her voice within me like a sacred melody. The waves seemed to echo her name as I sailed back, and I realized that love, true love, does not need to be seen to be felt. It exists quietly, breathing in the spaces between memories and moments. The people saw their prince return wiser, gentler, changed, but they would never know that my heart was still elsewhere, kneeling at the feet of the woman who had made me understand what it means to belong. Now, in the solitude of my later years, I often stand on my balcony, watching the horizon where her land lies hidden beyond the mist. I imagine her standing on her own terrace, doing the same. We do not need to speak, for our silence is sacred. It holds everything we were, everything we still are. The world may remember us as rulers of separate kingdoms, but destiny knows the truth. We were never apart. Our souls were written in the same language long before our countries ever existed. And perhaps that is love's greatest victory, not to unite kingdoms, but to unite hearts that were never meant to be divided. The years have turned me into an old man now, my hair silvered by time and my heart softened by memory. The weight of my crown feels lighter, perhaps because I no longer wear it for power but for peace. The palace halls that once echoed with the voices of ambition are quiet, save for the soft rustle of parchment and the sound of my quill as I write to her. Letters that may never reach her hands, yet they bring me solace. I tell her of the dawns that remind me of her laughter, of the nights when the stars seem to whisper her name. The world still calls me Your Majesty, but I have come to realize that titles fade and love endures. She remains the one truth I carry, the single chapter of my life written not in ink, but in soul. Sometimes I see her in dreams, not as a queen surrounded by her court, but as the woman who once stood beneath the willow trees, her hair dancing with the wind, her eyes holding 1,000 promises. In those dreams we are young again, unburdened by borders or duty. I reach out and she takes my hand, and for a moment everything feels as it should have been. Yet when I wake, I do not feel sorrow. I feel gratitude for having known a love so deep that it still breathes in my silence. People speak of victories won in battle or wealth earned in gold, but the greatest victory of my life was finding her, even if I could never keep her. As the sun sets beyond the horizon, painting the sky in the same hues I once saw in her eyes, I whisper a prayer that when my final day comes, The wind might carry my spirit across the sea, to her kingdom, to her heart. I imagine her waiting there, by the same lake where we last spoke, smiling that eternal smile that once healed a restless prince. And maybe, beyond this world of walls and crowns, we will meet again, not as rulers of distant lands, but as two souls finally free of every chain. For in the end, I have learned that love does not die, it simply changes form, waiting patiently for the day it can bloom again, in another life, under the same endless sky.